The sun was setting over the small town of Pine Ridge as Miguel Reyes wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag that had seen better days. The smell of motor oil and metal hung in the air of his modest auto repair shop. The sign outside read Reyes and Son Auto Repair, though it had been just Miguel for the past 5 years since his father's passing. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, though the dollars had been fewer and farther between lately. He glanced at the stack of bills on his cluttered desk: electric, rent, suppliers, and worst of all, the bank notice threatening foreclosure if he missed another payment. The red "Final Note I See" stamp seemed to glow brighter with each passing moment. Miguel was bone-tired. He'd been working since 5 a.m. trying to fix Mrs. Johnson's old station wagon. The parts had cost more than he'd quoted her, but he couldn't bring himself to charge the elderly widow extra. She brought him homemade tamales every Christmas, just like she used to do for his father. He flicked off the lights and took one last look around the garage. The concrete floor was cracked in places, the tool cabinets were dented and worn, but everything was meticulously organized, a lesson his father had drilled into him since he was tall enough to hold a wrench. "Take care of your tools, and I'll take care of you," his father used to say. If only it were that simple for the business itself. As Miguel pulled the heavy metal door closed and fumbled with his keys in the lock, his phone rang. He almost ignored it, probably another customer who would have to be told he couldn't extend credit anymore. But something made him fish the phone from his pocket. "Miguel speaking," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder as he finally got the stubborn lock to click. "Hey, Miguel, it's Rick from the airport." The voice on the other end sounded stressed and slightly out of breath. Miguel hadn't spoken to Rick in months, though they'd been friends since high school. Rick had landed a job at the regional airport while Miguel had taken over the family business. "Rick? What's up, man? Everything okay?" Miguel asked, hearing the urgency in his friend's voice. "Listen, I need a huge favor. We've got a situation here. There's this private jet, super fancy Gulfstream, with mechanical problems. Our aviation mechanics are all out on another job, and this thing needs to be in the air in 3 hours." Miguel laughed. "And you're calling me? I fix cars, not planes, remember?" I know, Rick replied quickly. "But the owner is desperate and offering serious money, triple the standard rate. You're the best mechanic I know, and honestly, an engine is an engine, right?" Miguel leaned against his beat-up pickup truck, considering the offer. He knew planes and cars were different beasts, but he had worked on all kinds of engines before. Plus, the mention of triple pay made the foreclosure notice flash in his mind. "How serious is the problem?" Miguel asked, already calculating what bills he could pay if he took the job. "Something with the hydraulics, they think." The warning light came on during pre-flight checks. The pilot says it's probably not major, but they can't fly without getting it fixed and certified. Miguel rubbed his tired eyes. "And the owner? Who are we talking about?" "Elena Vasquez," Rick said, dropping the name like a bomb. Miguel's eyebrows shot up. Everyone knew Elena Vasquez, the tech genius who had revolutionized battery storage technology and was worth billions. Her face was on business magazines and her company's products were changing the energy landscape worldwide. "You're saying Elena Vasquez wants me to fix her private jet?" Miguel asked in disbelief. "I'm saying she needs someone, anyone with mechanical skills, and I thought of you. She needs to be in Tokyo for some huge meeting. Please, man, I'll owe you one." Miguel looked at his small repair shop, then at his truck with over 200,000 miles on it, and thought about his mother's medical bills piling up at home. "Text me the airport gate. I'll grab my tools and be there in 20 minutes, he said, a mixture of nerves and excitement flooding his system. As he threw his toolbox into the truck and started the engine, Miguel had no idea how this unexpected call was about to change his life forever. He was just hoping he wouldn't embarrass himself trying to fix a multi-million-dollar aircraft. A little extra cash to keep the lights on for another month, that's all he was expecting. The universe, however, had much bigger plans for Miguel Reyes that evening. Miguel's old pickup truck rumbled through the security gate at Pine Ridge Regional Airport after Rick called ahead to clear his entrance. The evening sky had darkened, and the airport's runway lights created long shadows across the tarmac. His heart pounded as he followed the directions to Hangar 7, where the private jet waited. He'd never been to the private aviation section of the airport before. Regular folks like him used the main terminal on those rare occasions when they could afford to fly at all. As he pulled up to the hangar, Miguel let out a low whistle. The sleek white Gulfstream G650 sat under bright lights, its polished surface gleaming like a diamond among stones compared to the other smaller aircraft nearby. "Miguel, thank goodness you're here." Rick jogged over, wearing his airport ground crew uniform. His face was flushed with stress, and he kept checking his watch. "The situation's getting tense. Ms. Vasquez has been pacing in the terminal for the last hour." Around the jet, several people in uniforms were talking in worried tones. The pilot, a tall man with silver hair at his temples, was arguing with someone on the phone. "So what exactly am I walking into here?" Miguel asked, grabbing his toolbox from the truck bed. It suddenly felt inadequate next to the multi-million-dollar aircraft. Rick lowered his voice. "The primary hydraulic system is showing pressure loss. The pilot did the pre-flight check and caught it before takeoff, thank goodness. But now they can't leave until it's fixed, and Ms. Vasquez absolutely needs to be in Tokyo by tomorrow evening." "What's in Tokyo?" Miguel asked, curious about what could be so important. "Some massive deal that could either make or break her company. The business channels have been buzzing about it all week." Rick glanced toward the terminal. "She's not usually like this, but today she's been. Let's just say everyone's staying out of her way." The pilot hung up his call and approached them. His name tag read Captain Henderson. "You the mechanic?" he asked, looking Miguel up and down with obvious doubt. Miguel nodded, suddenly very aware of his oil-stained work clothes and the rays and sun patch on his shirt. "Miguel Reyes. I primarily work on cars, but I've handled some small aircraft engines in the past." The captain didn't look reassured. "Well, you're all we've got right now. The hydraulic pressure keeps dropping. I've sent the readouts to our usual mechanics, but they're 3 hours away at another airport." Miguel set down his toolbox. "Let me take a look. I'll be honest about whether I can help or not." The captain led him to the aircraft and up the metal stairs. Inside, Miguel was momentarily distracted by the luxury, cream leather seats, polished wood paneling, and what looked like a fully stocked bar. This was a different world from his greasy garage. "Through here," the captain said, opening a panel that led to a compartment where some of the control systems were accessible. Miguel knelt down and examined the setup. Aircraft systems were more complex than cars, but the basic principles were similar. He spotted a small puddle of hydraulic fluid and traced it to its source. "I need to check the engine housing," he said. Outside, standing under the wing with the engine compartment open above him, Miguel carefully inspected each component. The setup was familiar yet different, like a puzzle where he recognized the pieces but not the full picture. He took his time, methodically working through each possibility, ignoring the impatient glances from the crew. After 20 minutes of examination, he spotted something, a hairline crack in one of the hydraulic lines, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. It was in a spot that would be easy to miss during routine maintenance. "I found the problem," he announced, pointing it out to the captain. "This line has a manufacturing defect. See how the metal is stressed here? It's been slowly leaking fluid." Captain Henderson squinted at the spot. "I'll be damned. Can you fix it?" Miguel thought for a moment, running through the possible solutions in his mind. "Yes, but I'll need some parts that I don't have with me. Do you have a maintenance shed here?" As they discussed options, Miguel felt someone watching him. He turned to see a woman standing near the hangar entrance, her arms crossed and her gaze intense. She wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Even from a distance, her presence commanded attention. Elena Vasquez had decided to see for herself who was working on her aircraft and whether her crucial trip to Tokyo would happen at all. As their eyes met across the tarmac, neither had any idea that fate had just dealt them both a hand that would change everything. Elena Vasquez couldn't stand still. The private terminal lounge, with its plush chairs and attentive staff, felt like a cage. She paced back and forth, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, occasionally glancing through the large windows at her stranded jet. "Any update?" she asked her assistant, who was frantically typing on a tablet. They'd found a local mechanic who's examining the aircraft now, the assistant replied, not looking up. Captain Henderson says he seems to know what he's doing. Elena ran a hand over her face, trying to calm herself. This Tokyo meeting wasn't just another business deal. Her company had developed a breakthrough energy storage system that could bring affordable electricity to regions that had never had reliable power. The Japanese investors were her best shot at scaling up production quickly, but they were notoriously punctual and unforgiving of delays. If she missed this meeting, years of work might collapse. She walked to the window, watching the mechanic working on her jet. There was something oddly familiar about him, the way he moved, how he tilted his head when concentrating. She couldn't place it, but it nagged at her. "I'm going out there," she announced suddenly. "Ms. Vasquez, they'll update us when." "I need to see for myself," Elena cut off her assistant. The staff knew better than to argue when she used that turn. Outside, the evening air was cool against her face. Elena had built her reputation on understanding the smallest details of her technology. She didn't trust others to solve problems she couldn't understand herself. As she approached the aircraft, the mechanic was explaining something to Captain Henderson, pointing at a component. His voice carried across the tarmac, confident and clear. "The good news is that I can fix it. The bad news is that the proper replacement part isn't available here. But I have an idea that should work safely for your flight." Elena stopped a few yards away, suddenly struck by a memory. That voice. She knew that voice from somewhere. The mechanic turned, noticing her presence, and their eyes met. Time seemed to freeze for a moment as recognition dawned on both their faces. "Miguel," she said, hardly believing it. "Miguel Reyes?" His eyes widened in surprise. "Elena?" "From Professor Chen's engineering physics class." The captain and ground crew looked between them, confused. Elena stepped closer, memories flooding back from 15 years ago. "Engineering 301. You sat next to me in the lab. You helped me understand capacitor discharge cycles." Miguel nodded slowly, equally stunned. "You were always taking things apart to see how they worked. And you were always figuring out how to put them back together better than before," she finished. A small smile formed on Miguel's face. "I never thought I'd see you again, especially not like this. I read about your success in the papers. Vasquez Technologies. I should have made the connection." Elena felt a strange mixture of emotions. Miguel had been the brightest student in their class, the one everyone expected to revolutionize engineering. She had been the struggling student from a wealthy family, fighting to prove she belonged there on merit, not money. "What happened to you?" she asked without thinking. "You disappeared after first semester. Professor Chen said you were headed for a brilliant career." A shadow passed over Miguel's face. "Life happened. My dad got sick. Someone had to run the shop and take care of my mom." He gestured to his work clothes. "Wasn't exactly the future I had planned, but we don't always get to choose, do we?" The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Elena understood choices and sacrifices all too well. "So," she said, gesturing to the aircraft, "can you really fix it?" "I need to be in Tokyo by tomorrow evening. It's important." Miguel nodded, his professional demeanor returning. "The hydraulic line has a manufacturing defect. I can create a bypass that will hold until you reach Tokyo. It won't be pretty, but it will be safe." "How long?" she asked. 2 hours, maybe less if I can get the parts I need from the maintenance shed." Elena studied him for a moment. The universe had a strange sense of humor, sending Miguel Reyes back into her life at this critical moment. The quiet, brilliant lab partner who had once explained complex engineering concepts to her with patience and clarity was now the person standing between her and potential business disaster. "Do whatever you need to do," she said finally. "If anyone can fix this, I believe it's you." For the first time that day, Elena felt a strange sense of calm. As Miguel returned to work with renewed purpose, she found herself wondering about the path not taken, both his and her own. The airport's floodlights cast long shadows across the tarmac as Miguel worked on the jet's hydraulic system. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. He had stripped down to his white undershirt, his work shirt draped over a nearby toolbox. The maintenance shed had provided some of what he needed, but not everything. Elena stood nearby, her jacket removed and her sleeves rolled up, watching him with intense interest. She had dismissed her hovering assistant with a firm, I'll call if I need anything, surprising her staff with her decision to stay by the aircraft. Hand me that wrench, Miguel asked, pointing to a tool just out of his reach. Without hesitation, Elena picked it up and placed it in his outstretched hand. Their fingers brushed briefly, and both pretended not to notice. So you run Vasquez Technologies now, Miguel said as he carefully removed a damaged section of line. Last I heard, you were struggling with the basic principles of energy storage. Elena laughed softly. And now I have 3 patents on it. Funny how things work out. She leaned in closer to see what he was doing. What about you? You were the one who understood everything instantly. Professor Chen called you a natural-born engineer. Miguel's hands paused for just a moment before continuing their work. My dad's heart attack came 2 weeks before finals. Mom couldn't run the shop alone, and we needed the income. He shrugged as if it were nothing. Sometimes life chooses for you. You could have gone back, Elena said quietly. Medical bills, mortgage, reality. Miguel's tone wasn't bitter, just matter-of-fact. By the time things stabilized, it seemed too late. The hydraulic line was now fully exposed, revealing the hairline crack that had been causing the pressure loss. Miguel pointed it out to Elena. See that? Manufacturing defect. The metal was stressed during fabrication, created a weak point. Probably has been slowly getting worse for months. Elena nodded, fascinated both by the problem and by the confident way Miguel diagnosed it. This was a side of him she remembered well, the guy who could see through complex systems to find the one small thing that was out of place. I've got most of what I need to fix it, but I'm missing a coupling that can handle this kind of pressure, Miguel explained. He sat back on his heels, thinking, if I had a machine shop, I could make one, but... Elena checked her watch. Time was ticking away. What about a workaround? Something temporary that could get us to Tokyo. Miguel rubbed his chin, leaving a small grease mark. There might be a way. He walked over to his truck and rummaged around in the back, returning with a part from his own vehicle. This is from the high-pressure fuel system in my truck. Different application, but similar tolerance. I can modify it to work with your hydraulic system. It won't be a permanent fix, but it should hold until you can get a proper repair in Tokyo. You're taking apart your own truck to fix my jet? Elena asked, surprised. Miguel shrugged. I can get a replacement part for the truck tomorrow. You need to be in Tokyo tomorrow. Seems simple enough to me. As he worked to modify the part, Elena found herself opening up about the Tokyo meeting, how she developed technology that could store renewable energy efficiently and affordably, potentially bringing electricity to millions who lived without it. The Japanese investors were key to scaling up production quickly. That's why I can't miss this meeting, she explained. It's not about the money. It's about getting this technology to the people who need it before someone else does it with a worse, cheaper version that'll set the industry back a decade. Miguel nodded, understanding the stakes in a way her usual business associates often didn't. So it's not just business. It's a mission. Exactly. Elena smiled, surprised by how good it felt to be truly understood. As the night deepened, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Miguel working methodically on the complex repair, Elena holding parts steady or handing him tools when needed. They talked about old professors, shared memories of college, and gradually filled in the 15-year gap in their lives. Captain Henderson approached cautiously, his concern evident. Ms. Vasquez, it's getting late. Should we be looking at alternatives for your Tokyo trip? Before Elena could answer, Miguel looked up from his work, his face streaked with grease, but his eyes clear and confident. Give me 30 more minutes. We're going to get this bird in the air tonight. Elena nodded in agreement, her trust in Miguel growing with each passing minute. As the captain walked away, she couldn't help but wonder at the strange twist of fate that had brought Miguel Reyes back into her life at exactly this moment. The minutes ticked by as Miguel made the final adjustments to his improvised repair. His hands moved with precision born from years of fixing engines that others had given up on. The modified truck part now sat perfectly integrated into the jet's hydraulic system, not pretty but functional. A small pool of light from a work lamp illuminated his face, deep in concentration. Almost there, he murmured, tightening the last connection. Let's test the pressure now. Elena stood close by, her expensive shoes discarded hours ago, watching with an engineer's appreciation for good work. She'd called off her assistant's repeated attempts to get her back to the terminal, preferring to stay and watch Miguel work his magic. "Ready," she said, moving to the small control panel as Miguel had shown her. She flipped the switch that would pressurize the system, holding her breath. The gauge needle slowly rose, climbing steadily into the green zone. "Hold steady at 2400 psi," Elena read out, excitement creeping into her voice. Miguel watched for any signs of leaking around his repair. Nothing. The bypass was working perfectly. A broad smile spread across his face as he wiped his hands on a rag. "We did it," he said simply. Captain Henderson, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward to check the readings himself. His skeptical expression gradually transformed into one of amazement. "I've never seen a repair like this," the captain admitted. "Our regular mechanics would have replaced the entire section, grounded us for days." "Sometimes you don't need a new part," Miguel replied. "Just a new way of looking at the old one." Elena couldn't help but stare at Miguel. This man who had once been destined for engineering greatness, now working miracles with cast-off parts and pure ingenuity. In those hours working beside him, she'd learned more about him than she had during their entire semester as lab partners. She'd heard about his mother's ongoing cancer treatments that drained whatever savings he managed to squirrel away. How the shop that had been in his family for 2 generations was 3 months behind on its loan payments. How, despite it all, he still found time to teach basic car maintenance to teens at the local community center. The jet's engines roared to life as the captain began his pre-flight checks. The ground crew returned to their positions, preparing for the now possible departure. The relief on the tarmac was almost visible, like a weight lifted from everyone's shoulders. Ms. Vasquez, her assistant, called, hurrying across the tarmac with a tablet. "The pilot says we can leave in 20 minutes. I've updated your Tokyo team. They'll adjust the schedule to accommodate our late arrival." Elena nodded absently, her eyes still on Miguel as he packed up his tools. He worked with the same care, putting away each wrench and screwdriver as he had fixing her multi-million-dollar aircraft. "Give us a minute," she told her assistant, who looked surprised but retreated to a respectful distance. Miguel closed his toolbox and stood up, stretching his back after hours of hunched work. He looked tired but satisfied, the look of a craftsman who knows he's done good work. "Well," he said with a small smile, "I guess this is the part where I give you my bill, and we go our separate ways again." Something about his words struck Elena deeply. In the corporate world she inhabited, people came and went based on their usefulness to her goals. Relationships were transactional, temporary. But standing there on the tarmac with grease under her fingernails for the first time in years, she felt a connection that went beyond the night's emergency. What if it didn't have to be that way? She asked, surprising herself with the question. Miguel looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" Elena thought about the brilliant mind that had helped her understand complex engineering principles years ago, the same mind that had just improvised a solution her team of highly paid engineers might never have considered. She thought about the technology she was developing and the problems they still hadn't solved with the practical application. "You know," she said, "the biggest challenge we're facing isn't the theory anymore. It's making the technology work in real-world conditions, especially in places without infrastructure." Miguel nodded slowly, not quite following where she was going. "Your solution tonight, taking something designed for one purpose and adapting it for another, that's exactly the kind of thinking we need." Elena could feel the idea taking shape as she spoke. The best engineers can design perfect systems for perfect conditions. But the world isn't perfect, especially where our technology is needed most. A flicker of understanding crossed Miguel's face. "Are you offering me a job?" Elena looked at the man before her, talented, resourceful, and completely unaware of his own brilliance. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The airport floodlights cast a theatrical glow across the tarmac as the ground crew finished their final preparations. Miguel stood by his truck, watching the activity surrounding the jet. The night had been surreal, and now it was coming to an end. He'd written up an invoice, triple the standard rate as promised. Though it felt strange charging for work on an aircraft he wasn't technically qualified to touch. He saw Elena walking toward him, no longer the frazzled businesswoman from hours earlier. There was a determined look in her eyes that he recognized from their college days, the the same expression she'd worn when tackling a particularly challenging problem. "Here," she said, handing him an envelope. "Your payment, plus a little extra for saving my Tokyo deal." Miguel took the envelope, thumbing it open. His eyes widened at the check inside. Far more than they had agreed upon. Enough to catch up on the shop's mortgage and maybe even get ahead on his mother's medical bills. "This is too much," he said, though his heart raced at the sight of the amount. "It's not enough," Elena replied firmly. "You did in 3 hours what my entire engineering team couldn't figure out how to do in a day." Miguel slipped the check into his pocket, a mix of pride and embarrassment washing over him. "Well, I guess this is goodbye then." Again, he extended his hand for a handshake. "It was good seeing you, Elena. I'm glad things worked out for you." Instead of taking his hand, Elena glanced back at her waiting jet, then to Miguel again. The airport lights caught the determination in her eyes. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice taking on a new tone, "about what you did tonight, about how you think." Miguel tilted his head, unsure where she was going with this. "Do you know why my company has been successful?" she asked. "Because you're smart and had the resources to make your ideas happen," Miguel suggested. Elena shook her head. "Because I understand the theory, the science. But the biggest challenge we face isn't coming up with new ideas, it's making them work in the real world, in places where conditions aren't perfect." She gestured toward the jet. "What you did tonight, that kind of practical problem solving is exactly what we need. Taking something designed for one purpose and adapting it for another. Seeing solutions where others see only problems." Miguel leaned against his truck, crossing his arms. "What exactly are you saying?" Elena took a deep breath. "I want you to come work with me. Not for me, with me." The ground crew were staring now, clearly wondering why their boss was having an intense conversation with a mechanic instead of boarding her urgent flight. "I've been looking for a technical partner who understands how things actually work when theory meets reality," Elena continued. "Someone who can help bridge the gap between what our technology could do and what it actually does in the field." Miguel laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm a mechanic, Elena. I fix cars in a small town. I didn't even finish my engineering degree. And yet you just fixed a multi-million-dollar aircraft with a part from your truck," she countered. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need for the projects in rural areas where there aren't fancy tools or perfect conditions." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I'm not just offering you a job, Miguel. I'm proposing a partnership." Miguel's breath caught. "A partnership?" "Head of Practical Applications. A new division focused on real-world implementation of our technology," Elena explained, her words coming faster now, excitement building. "Full benefits, of course, including comprehensive medical coverage that would take care of your mother's treatments." Miguel's mind raced, imagining a life beyond the constant struggle to keep his shop afloat, but doubt crept in. "Why me? You could hire anyone with my skills who actually finished their degree." Elena's expression softened. "Because you see what others miss. You always did. Even back in college, you understood things intuitively that the rest of us had to struggle to learn." She glanced back at her waiting jet, then made a decision that surprised even herself. In front of her stunned crew, she reached out and took Miguel's grease-stained hand in her own. "I'm not just looking for an employee, Miguel. I'm looking for a partner who shares my vision. Someone who sees the world the way I want to see it, full of possibilities rather than limitations." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. This wasn't just a job offer. It was something more. A recognition of what they might accomplish together, combining her resources with his practical genius. "It sounds like you're proposing more than just a business arrangement," Miguel said quietly, his heart pounding as he looked into her eyes. Elena didn't look away. "Maybe I am." 6 months later, Miguel stood at the center of a large, bright workshop that was worlds away from his old auto repair shop. Large windows let in the morning sunlight, illuminating the various prototypes and testing equipment that filled the space. On the wall hung a sign that read Practical Applications Division, with both the Vasquez Technologies logo and a smaller version of his father's old shop logo beneath it. Elena's idea, a gesture that had touched him deeply. Miguel adjusted his safety glasses as he examined the hybrid engine system spread out on the workbench in front of him. The design had started with his Tarmac repair idea, taking components designed for one purpose and adapting them for another. Now it was evolving into something that could revolutionize how their clean energy technology was deployed in remote areas. "How's it coming along?" asked a technician who was helping him with the testing phase. "Almost there," Miguel replied, tightening a connection. "One more adjustment and we should be ready for the field test tomorrow." The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of change. After that night at the airport, Miguel hadn't accepted Elena's offer immediately. He'd asked for time to think, to consider what it would mean for his mother, for the family business, for the community that relied on him. Elena had respected his need for space, boarding her jet to Tokyo after exchanging phone numbers. Her business deal in Japan had been successful, partly, she later told him, because the story of her jet's miraculous repair had impressed the Japanese investors with her resourcefulness. 3 days after she returned, she had shown up at his garage, not in a business suit but in jeans and a simple blouse, ready to talk through his concerns. Together, they had found solutions. His mother's medical care was now covered by the company's premium health plan. The old repair shop had been renovated and turned into a training center where young people from the community could learn practical mechanical skills, a program Miguel oversaw on Fridays. And Miguel himself had found a new purpose using his hands-on knowledge to solve real-world problems. The door to the workshop swung open and Elena walked in. Unlike the corporate executives who rarely ventured into the hands-on areas of the company, she made a point of regularly visiting Miguel's division. Today, she wore a simple dress with a lab coat over it, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "There you are," she said with a warm smile. "Ready for the demonstration tomorrow?" Miguel nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just making the final adjustments. This version is 20% more efficient than the last prototype. It'll work even in the most extreme conditions we tested." Elena came closer, examining the system with genuine interest. In the months they'd been working together, she'd come to rely on his practical insights as much as he valued her theoretical knowledge. It was a partnership that balanced both their strengths. "The team in Thailand is excited to test it," she said. "If it works as well as we hope, we could start installations next month." Their eyes met over the workbench, and Miguel felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. Their relationship had evolved naturally over the months, from professional respect to friendship to something deeper neither had put into words yet. They had agreed to take things slowly, to build their professional partnership first, before exploring the personal connection that had sparked that night on the tarmac. "I've been thinking," Elena said, leaning against the workbench, "about that job title you never officially accepted." Miguel raised an eyebrow. Though he ran the Practical Applications division in all but name, he had insisted on keeping his job title simply as lead engineer, feeling uncomfortable with anything grander. "Head of Practical Applications," she continued. "It feels right now, doesn't it? You've built this division from nothing." Miguel looked around at the workshop that had become his second home, at the team of engineers and technicians who respected him not for his degree, but for his knowledge and problem-solving abilities. "Maybe it does," he admitted with a small smile. Elena's phone buzzed with a message. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes, she said, glancing at it. "Still on for dinner tonight?" Miguel nodded. Their Friday dinner had become a tradition, sometimes at fancy restaurants, sometimes at his mother's house where Elena had become a welcome guest. As she turned to leave, Miguel called after her, "Hey, Elena." She paused at the door, looking back. "That night at the airport. I never properly thanked you for taking a chance on me." Elena's expression softened. "We took a chance on each other," she corrected gently. "And I think we both made the right choice." As she left, Miguel returned to his work, a sense of contentment washing over him. He thought about how different his life had become in just 6 months, not just professionally or financially, but personally. He and Elena were building something together, step by step, day by day. Not the hasty marriage proposal of a fairy tale, but something real and solid with a foundation that grew stronger with each challenge they overcame together. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear, but for the first time in years, Miguel Reyes was looking forward to the journey.